Hello and good afternoon to all of you who are tuning in online. Tomorrow will mark 1 year since the military takeover of the government in Myanmar, and you'll have seen the Secretary General's statement on this that we shared with you yesterday. We're delighted to be joined today by the Secretary General's Special Envoy on Myanmar, Noeleen Heyzer. Ms. Heyzer, I know it's late for you in Singapore, so we appreciate your taking the time to speak with us today, and I'll turn over the floor to you right now. Please, over to you. Hello?
The sound is not very good. All right. Thank you, Farhan.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can hear me now? You can
Yes.
hear me now?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. I appreciate this early opportunity to engage the UN press, and I look forward to all our regular interaction. Now, 1 year since the 1st of February 2021, violence and brutality in Myanmar has only intensified and widened. Every day, I hear first-hand accounts directly from the ground. There has been a broad-based resistance movement built against the military regime, and all sides are hardening positions to using violence as a solution. The situation has become increasingly unstable as military operations intensify, including with recent aerial attacks, raising protection concerns. Around 1,500 civilians have been killed so far, and the number of internally displaced people continue to increase. By the end of 2021, more than 320,000 people remain internally displaced across the country. Now, since then, the number has reached over 400,000. And this is in addition to the 340,000 people already displaced before 1st February last year. Now, countless people are suffering from devastating socio-economic challenges and humanitarian hardships. Almost half of Myanmar's population, some 25 million people, now live in poverty. And more than 14.4 million people are estimated to be in need of humanitarian assistance and protection. And while Myanmar faces another potential COVID-19 surge, requiring all citizens to come together to fight the pandemic, its public health care is in disarray. We are also witnessing an unprecedented level of drug manufacturing and trade, while human trafficking and illegal mining and logging have increased. The expansion of illicit activities further fuels the conflicts and has wide-ranging security, health, and environmental consequences that affect not only Myanmar, but the entire region in the heart of Asia. The painful uprooting of Myanmar's democratic gains will have lasting repercussions. A generation of young people that thrived under the democratic transition is now sacrificing their lives for freedom and for the love of their country. As the Secretary General has underlined, we must stand firm with the people of Myanmar and act beyond expressions of solidarity in support of their aspirations for an inclusive society and protection of all communities, including the Rohingya. I've raised the alarm and called for action that is aligned with the will of the people of Myanmar, including in the Security Council on Friday, where I briefed together with the UN Special Envoy of Cambodia and the Acting Assistant Secretary General of OCHA. A Myanmar-led process guided by the aspiration of the people towards a peaceful, democratic, and inclusive future has to be supported by a coherent international approach grounded on regional unity. So it is fitting that following extensive consultations with all stakeholders in Myanmar, I have worked closely with the ASEAN Chair, the ASEAN Special Envoy, and all ASEAN foreign ministers and other international partners. I'm committed to working closely with ASEAN Special Envoy to supporting effective implementation of the ASEAN's 5-point consensus and to jointly mobilizing UN ASEAN action on the multiple crises affecting Myanmar. I believe that we together can deliver better for the people of Myanmar in COVID-19 and humanitarian assistance, addressing food insecurity and supporting socio-economic resilience. The people of Myanmar need to see tangible improvements on the ground in order to put their trust in any homegrown process towards a peaceful resolution reflective of their will and needs. Based on my active discussions with the ASEAN leaders, I highlighted in the Security Council some actionable proposals on this front, including the need of a humanitarian pause in targeted areas to allow for effective and safe access for the urgent delivery of humanitarian assistance. I've called for greater action, including in the Security Council, to help lay down the building blocks to narrow the trust deficit and initiate talks about talks on peace, national unity, and democracy. For this to happen, aerial operations must cease immediately, and there must be credible progress in the eyes of the people. We also have to ensure the enabling conducive conditions for voluntary, safe, and dignified returns for the Rohingya and all communities in the Rakhine State, as well as urgent protection for refugees fleeing Myanmar. And this should be part of our broader efforts to find peaceful political solutions. In the interim, we must strengthen our efforts towards temporary solutions and refugee protection in the region in the spirit of international responsibility sharing. And in this respect, I applaud the government of Bangladesh and host communities for their continued generosity. Now, the road ahead will be long and difficult, but the time to act is now, and time is running out. We have a window of opportunity to build upon a unique unity across religious, ethnic, and communal lines that have also emerged. We must use this opening to help facilitate Myanmar work towards a common vision for their country. It will take time, but we can and we must work together. I thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Heyzer. I'll now open the floor up to questions. If anyone wants to ask anything, yes, please.
Thanks, Farhan. Hi, Ms. Heyzer. Thank you very much for the briefing. On behalf of the Correspondent Association of the UN, we welcome you. I just have a question. How come it took so long for you and the representative of ASEAN to be able to sit at the same meeting at the Security Council? I know you're new in your job, congratulations in your role, but isn't there a way to go a little bit faster on the Myanmar file?
Well, I must say that I started my job 6 weeks ago, and I've been working nonstop, engaging with all the stakeholders in Myanmar, in the region, and internationally. So I have not stopped working, and I'm pushing as hard as I can. But you did ask about why is it the ASEAN envoy took so long? Well, in a way, it's largely because ASEAN had to, first of all, meet, and the envoy had to be endorsed by the foreign ministers, and At the same time, there is an annual change in the chair of ASEAN, and therefore Brunei had the chair, and there was an ASEAN envoy in Brunei, but he was not allowed to enter Myanmar because he wanted to meet Aung San Suu Kyi and all the stakeholders, and that was not given. But the new envoy could not be created because it was the ASEAN. These are the peculiarities of ASEAN. So the envoy is actually the envoy of the ASEAN chair, and the ASEAN chair changes on the 1st of January. And there was going to be a meeting in the middle of January to approve the chair, but then it got into political problems. Maybe I can explain a little bit what that problem actually was, but it was mainly the fact that ASEAN is not united in terms of who should be represented from the Myanmar side, unless they actually have shown implementation on the 5-point consensus. And at this particular time, there was no indication that they have taken the implementation seriously enough. In fact, it didn't move. And therefore, except for the appointment of the ASEAN envoy. So the ASEAN chair, Cambodia, wanted, after their visit to Cambodia, wanted to invite the foreign minister from the military side. And many of the other foreign ministers, several of the foreign ministers did not agree to that, wanted a non-political person to be represented. But it was also indicated that it was largely because of the COVID situation that made travel arrangements difficult. But whatever it is, there was an agreement to appoint the ASEAN chair by consensus through letters, and he was then able to address the Security Council together with me. So that took long, but it will be an ASEAN foreign ministers retreat coming up in the middle of February. I hope I have answered your question.
Thanks very much. James?
Special Envoy James Bays from Al Jazeera, and apologies, I haven't heard all of your briefing because we've had a Security Council meeting on Russia and Ukraine, and we've also had the Russian ambassador speaking to us a short time ago. But I've just been listening to your last answer on ASEAN, and given we're at the one year mark, isn't that one of the main problems over the last year? The divisions in ASEAN and ASEAN's weakness in dealing with this issue. Doesn't ASEAN now, if you're going to solve this crisis and bring back democracy to Myanmar, doesn't ASEAN now have to step up?
Well, obviously, you actually have to put pressure on Myanmar, and ASEAN foreign ministers are indeed doing that. And in fact, several of the heads of states are also doing that. And that's why there was a division within ASEAN. And this was actually to facilitate the implementation. Now, having said that, the current ASEAN chair, the Prime Minister of Cambodia, Hun Sen, went to Myanmar and came back with certain proposals, one of which is interesting, but it's not sufficient. And this is to have a humanitarian meeting in order to help deliver the humanitarian assistance that was part of the 5-point consensus. They said that this should be done without discrimination. But the mechanism that has been put in, I did mention that I was not satisfied that it was enough to deliver in a way that did not discriminate people who was not under the control of the military. So I offered my assistance, and this is where where the UN-ASEAN partnership is so critical. And I think that we can actually push the ASEAN agenda a lot more if the UN is also involved in helping to facilitate its implementation using the capacities and also the partnerships and the stakeholders that we are engaged with. So what I have, and this has been agreed, is agreed that I will help to co-facilitate that meeting. And when I do, one of the things that I have asked for is that there is a humanitarian pause precisely because not all areas are under the control of the military. And therefore, there has to be a humanitarian pause and, if possible, a humanitarian corridor in the areas that are not under the control of the military. So let's see how far we can go, and also to make sure that the people who are invited to that humanitarian meeting includes most of the stakeholders. So let me stop here and say that I hope that this year, because we are moving at least we are trying to move, and there is commitment to move at least on the humanitarian side. And also, apparently, the military is allowing the ASEAN envoy to meet with some of the stakeholders. Hopefully, it is all the stakeholders and not the selected few. So let's see. Definitely on the humanitarian front, we need to move forward. But even before we do that, I have called very strongly for a ceasefire, because there's no way a ceasefire, at least in terms of the aerial bombings, that has to stop immediately. Violence has to be decreased. So unless that happens, I mean, there's, you can't just be saving lives while not actually engaging with protection.
Thank you. And next question is from Abdul Hamid.
Thank you, Ms. Heyzer. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayami from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have two questions. The first is if you can give us a little bit more details about the suffering, the extra suffering of the Rohingya during this last year after the coup. And the second, taking an account of another coup that took place in Sudan and how the Security Council reacted to that coup, how do you see that the support of the Security Council to your effort and your colleagues in addressing the issue in Myanmar and that coup? Do you see that the support of the Security Council is lagging compared to that in Sudan? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very important question. I think, to be very honest, every time when I listen to stories of the Rohingya that I hear very often, my heart breaks. And they have been in the camp for over a year. In fact, since 2017. And you asked about the impact last year. Now, obviously, the situations in the camp have gotten worse because of the overcrowding and because it's very difficult. Bangladesh is doing everything it can. But the host community, if they don't see the action and the conditions that allow the Rohingya to return, sometimes their patience also wears down. And that is very difficult. Now, at the same time, the people in the camps, obviously, because they've been there for so long, the youth are not getting the type of dreams or the implementation of the dreams that they have, like all young people. There's lack of although education is being given, it's not enough. Livelihoods are not enough. And therefore, they look forward to obviously a more dignified future. But when they look to what is happening in Myanmar, in the Rakhine, they see that the conditions in the Rakhine for the Rohingyas who are left behind are not really improving that much either. So there are attempts to now take those difficult boat journeys again to other shores. And therefore, I suggest, and I have suggested, that it is critical that we do three things. One, we have to ensure that in the structural transformation and in the long-term democratic transition that we are supporting in Myanmar, that structural change have got to include the Rohingya. And in fact, I am sure you're aware that in the statement of the NUG, that has indeed happened. At the same time, besides the structural arrangements and transformation, we have to actually deal with the horizontal, the community aspects. And in the Rakhine, there are some signs that things are improving because we are able to work with some of the communities there, and people are indeed beginning to understand that what is happening to them happened to the Rohingyas. So there is an empathy that I have not seen before, which is really interesting. And that's why I talked about the fact in my address just now, that there is an interesting, and despite the difficulties and all the horrors that we are hearing, there is an empathy that is growing in the country that never existed before between the majority ethnicity and the minority groups. And this is very encouraging because this is where, if we are to really build the what I call the foundation of a new possibility, then that empathy and that unity is very critical. So at least there are some sprouts there, if you like, in terms of trust building. But at the same time, it is critical that the regional countries also play their role and support the fact that the situation is not what we all want. And therefore, they need to basically support the Rohingyas in the host community, but also when they arrive on the shores of some of the neighboring countries, then they should be taken in as refugees. So let me stop there with the Rohingya issue. But let me talk about the Security Council. I think what is happening now is that everybody feels that ASEAN should take the lead. And in the Security Council, there's a lot of emphasis that regional organizations should use their capacity to facilitate the resolution of conflicts that have arisen in the region. And but at the same time, what I have said to the Security Council, I mean, it was a closed briefing, so let me just summarize it briefly, because I've said it in other open public spaces as well. And I said that this process has got to be a Myanmar-led process, reflecting the will of the people, but it has to be supported through regional unity, through ASEAN, but more, because ASEAN, the ASEAN countries are not the only one. At least two of the ASEAN countries share borders with Myanmar, but you also have India and you have China sharing borders and Bangladesh sharing borders with Myanmar. And India and China are on the Security Council. But what we need is regional unity, a much stronger regional unity. And of course, we have to bring Japan in as well. So I talked about a Myanmar-led process supported by regional unity, but also highly supported by a more coordinated and integrated international strategy. And that must come from the Security Council.
Thank you. And then last question to our guest is from Evelyn Leopold. Evelyn? Are Are you there?
Would you support, could you suggest a ban on weapons and armaments being delivered to Myanmar? Do you know how many countries are supplying Burma with weapons? Thank you.
Evelyn, lovely to see you, Evelyn. It's been quite a while, but it's such a joy. Thank you for your question. What you are touching on are sanctions, and it's not the UN that makes these decisions, it's our member states. So let's leave it to the member states.
And with that, I'd like to again thank our guest, Noeleen Heyzer. Thanks very much. I know you've stayed up late in order to provide us with this briefing, and so thank you very much. And I wish you the best of luck in your work ahead.
Thank you very much, Farhan, and thank you, everyone.
Okay, have a great evening.